I will wait for the time to turn to 5:51, and then we can just get started. Is that all right with everybody? Some general consensus?
Yeah, more people can join as we as time passes too. They can hop in at any point.
And Chin Evelyn, good call. Some people call for wine and beer. So yeah, you make yourself comfortable. You're at home, so.
Yes, I have the tea to get me started. I need caffeine. All right, 5:51. Let's get started. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today on our first remote session for Product Tank. We live in unprecedented and challenging times where we're all shifting the way we work. And we are so lucky that we can continue to meet and thrive as a community virtually. And so I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time and joining, especially given that a lot of us spent most of our day today working remotely in the same manner. And then some tips for today's session. One, yes, please mute yourself so that our presenters don't get disrupted. We do encourage you to add your questions in the chat. There's one funny feature of Zoom where it doesn't automatically send it to everyone. You do have to confirm when you go to chat that the drop-down says everyone. Otherwise, your messages may be sent privately to someone else. And then during the Q&A session, just to make it easier for presenters to find that it is a Q&A question, we ask that you put a little Q at the beginning of your text that says Q&A, just to make it easier. So on today's agenda, we have Courtney Claessens from Canadian Digital Service, Mike, and Mike, I will not try to say your last name because I did not practice it. So I will I will avoid that. From Hut 4.
That's okay.
You can say it though, please do.
Well, it's Malewicz, but you can also say Malewicz, so it doesn't matter.
Malewicz. Okay, thank you. Malewicz.
There was a painter by that name, so that might kind of be something to catch up on.
All right, and Sheri Zelle from Pier 39. So the first session is actually going to be about from research to release, keep your product team fully engaged. And then next two sessions, Mike and Sheri do get into their own insights and learnings of how they work remotely or have worked remotely, as well as other topics. But really, really relevant session today to how we're all adjusting to work. So let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so Courtney's up first, and just a little introduction to Courtney. She is a senior product manager at Canadian Digital Services, where she works with teams to build the right thing at the right time, hopefully just like the rest of us, and hold people at the center of their products. Before joining the public service, she worked at Esri, building products to connect local governments and their communities using open data. And then before that, Courtney studied urban geography in undergrad and worked with researchers to determine how new geospatial technologies are adopted by local governments and how that can change government-citizen interactions. So take it away, Courtney. I will stop sharing and you can go ahead and share and start presenting.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
All right, cool. I'm like back in the webinar days. I'm gonna do my best here. So today I'm talking from research to release and how to keep your product team fully engaged as you go through what is kind of like the feature life cycle. So this is me, some things that I like. I like building tech for good, civically minded, want to make sure that the things that I'm building are for the social good. A big thing that motivates me is working on teams that are more than the sum of their parts. I love working on a team that melds well together and are part of this like well-oiled machine where we can like ship stuff and then really see the tangible results from our collective efforts, and knowing that everything that we put out there has been touched by research, by design, by dev, and by policy in some circumstances, and we're able to see the impact of that. In doing that, I really love making order out of ambiguity. A lot of the products that I work on, they're just like, here's a problem area and go, like figure it out. And that's a really daunting, scary place to be. But it's really interesting. And above all else, I'm very pragmatic about my product approaches. We hear a lot about like Scrum frameworks and how you should be formatting things in a very specific way. And I feel like the more dogmatic we are about things, like the more like stuck we are. So I would just say that, like, in that vein, take everything that I'm gonna talk now with like a healthy grain of salt and see what might work for you and see what might not work for you. I'm totally, like, I love process, but I'm not a stickler for any particular process at all. But I'm just gonna talk to you about something that works for me and for my team. So this evening, as we're looking at from research to release, like, what does that mean? So I'm going to be kind of talking about two main things. One is on my team, how are stories born? So we're reviewing how we take research insights and then work with the entire team to identify how we might be able to solve some of the problems that are identified throughout the research that we do. And then once we kind of have that frame of the story, how do we then get them to done? So how do they move through our development cycle, and how are the different parts of the team engaged throughout that process? And when I say the team, at CDS, we work on multidisciplinary teams. And for us, that means a product manager, a design researcher, a designer, whether that's interaction, service, content design, a developer, and a policy person where applicable. In government, we do a lot of work to navigate the gnarly bureaucracies. I'm sure we have some government folks on the call that have experience doing that, and it really helps to have people that know the ins and outs of the policies around the programs that we're dealing with. We'll have at least one of each of these people on the team. Sometimes we'll have two designers or two or three developers. But we want to make sure that all of these skill sets are there and rounded out. And we work together, and we work together from the beginning. So even when we're in discovery, there's developers that are there, that are present. And right now we're working fully distributedly. So what I'm going to share in this process, the neat thing about it is that you don't have to be beside the people to be able to stay connected with the different folks on your team, and to even do research with people. You can do that remotely too. But first, so why is it important for the team to be engaged as you're moving things from research through the sprint cycle to releasing things? I kind of go back to these three things that ring true for me. So one is making sure that we have team alignment on why we're building things and keeping the user's needs and motivations at the forefront of everyone's minds. If only like research and designers and product people are working through what like the story should be, what the interventions are, and then the designers do that and then just give it to the developers and say, build this, there's not a lot of context for the developers to understand like why those things are getting built in a certain way. And when we lose that context and we lose that alignment, we usually see a dip in quality of the work that we're doing. We usually see like some disengagement amongst people. So we want to make sure that everyone is aligned on the why. And then when we have everyone together at the very beginning, we're bringing a lot of issues that will pop up into the forefront. So if we have developers into the initial conversations about why, or like what we're going to be building, they're able to offer their technical perspective on things. And then so then we don't end up with a bunch of designs for stuff that aren't actually technically feasible. And lastly, we want to make sure that we're actually building the right thing once it does get to development. So we don't have this like broken telephone amongst features that what we thought in the first place was going to solve that person's problem. We want to make sure that that's the thing that actually gets built and that it doesn't kind of get morphed along the lines as you like hand off from research to design and then design hands off over to developers. Okay, so this is our cycle. This is what works for my team. And I get so distracted by the chat, but I'm just going to ignore it for now. But again, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. So our cycle here, we can start at the top. So we have issues that are identified from research. And then that goes into the team ideation on how to address them. And this is the bulk of the cycle that I was thinking of when I was first talking with Andrea about what I was going to talk about tonight. And then from that team ideation, we come out with some design innovations. It goes through the cycle over to development. They get verified and released, and then we validate them through more research. So we can kind of look at it as like, this bulk is like how stories are born, like how do we come up with the stuff that we want to be doing? And then this part is like how stories get to done. How do we then do those things that we identified? Okay, so let's dive into like what each of those steps are. And again, this is fairly high level. I know that there's lots of different intricacies of different workplaces and cultures and products that you're working on and stuff. Like the things that we're working on at CDS, we are pretty lucky that we can be like fairly confined just to our own particular team, and we have direct access to people. So it allows us the simplicity, maybe, I guess, is a way of putting it, of following this cycle, and it works out pretty well. But first, so research. Everything of what we're building should come from research. I know that there's lots of things that you need to put in from like a security standpoint, accessibility standpoint, et cetera, et cetera. And there's some things that a program might dictate that you have to do that doesn't come from research. But today I'm going to talk about things that are born out of research. So to start off with, our research sessions will have the design researcher to host the session, facilitate the session, but our note taker is usually a person from our team, and that person could be the designer, the developer, policy person, product manager. So we're exposing people on the team directly to research. And so we're automatically starting that like alignment and starting that like trickle of empathy throughout the whole team. But then after the research is conducted, the design researcher takes all that information, analyzes the results, and presents a playback of findings to the team. And these findings will cover the issues that were identified that we then need to fix. And we fix them, or we brainstorm how to fix them in what we call an ideation session. And this is a place where one person from each discipline on the team will come together to discuss possible ways to address these problems. So it's a bit of brainstorming. Each of these people that are present in this conversation are bringing the perspective of that discipline. So we have developers there because we need to make sure that what we're building, one, is technically feasible, but two, to see if any idea would expose any like people to undue risk. Like if it creates any like security vulnerabilities or any big accessibility issues, then we want to make sure that we know what those are up front. And the same thing with policy people. So policy people, for at least the product that I'm working on right now, which is a disability benefit, they are invaluable to have in there because they have like the real domain knowledge about the program and what we can do and what we can't do and stuff like that. So we track these conversations on Trello boards that we call these decision dashboards, and I'll show you like a quick, tiny little sample. So we start out with 2 columns, and on the left is one card for all of the issues that come up in research. So this is one example of a research insight that we had from one of our sessions. We do a lot of research with medical professionals, and we're building a form for them to fill out for their patients. And we found that in some places, they want to be able to add more detail to a selection of a prognosis. So it would give them the options of the prognosis, like will it get better, is unknown, like yes, no, unknown, or something like that. But we found that the medical professionals want to add some more information as to why they think it's yes or no or unknown. And then so the team will talk about like, well, how can we implement something that is going to meet the needs of those medical professionals? And I mean, this one is like a very simple intervention where we then change the title. We bring the card over and we change the title to medical professionals are able to add more detail to prognosis and frequency. So this looks like the addition of a text box underneath the radio button, like multiple choice. But the thing here is that we then copy in the insights from research into the card so that we know, like this is the thing that like the start of our story. And we were doing that. And we can take this and then carry it over into, like this forms the basis of our story, and then I'll go back and I'll write up the user stories for what this means, and then we put it in our backlog. But like to come up with this, we had, and it sounds silly because it is so simple, but there are more complicated examples where we want to make sure that we're covering the basis and have those perspectives from policy, dev, design, etc. And then we have like all the documentation as to, well, like why did you make this particular feature do this? And then we can go back here and call out the insights that we had as to back up and support those decision makings when stakeholders come and they want to know why you do certain things. Okay, I'm going to try and go a little bit faster. So we have our design and intervention. So designers go and they do what they do best. And we want to make sure that what they're working on is visible to other folks on the teams, that people can go in and add any comments if they need to. And then any new interactions that come up from the designer are documented in the story. And then that moves over to development. Developers go do what they do best. They might ask some questions, but then the key here is that they submit a PR to our GitHub, and a QA environment gets spun up automatically. And on each PR, we have to have both a code review and a design review. So this will make sure that we're properly verifying things. So just to see this, an example here. So this is a PR for adding confirmation dialogue for one of our features. And we have like the description and the instructions to go out and test this. And then Keith is our content designer, and he is requesting changes on behalf of our design team. So we want to make sure that whatever the developers built is actually, one, adhering to the story, but also like in spirit of like whatever we built is actually like addressing the motivation of the story. And then so they go through and they go back and forth from design and developers right on the GitHub issue. Keith will go in and make any copy changes himself. And then we have a review on behalf of the developers. So each PR that goes in, again, has the dev and the design review to make sure that we're building the right thing. And then 6, we want to make sure that we go out and then we validate. So we'll validate the changes in our next round of research. Everything that we make is a guess. We think that they're good guesses, but we make little small bets and see if they work or not. But with these like frequent rounds of research, we can go out and see if we were right. And then new issues will emerge and the whole cycle will start all over again. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. Pretty quick, and I can dive into any other particular part, but some caveats is that nothing is a silver bullet. I don't know of any one thing that is going to work for everybody. And I always get frustrated when I'm reminded that like product management and delivery is an art, not a science. But this is what works for my team and works within the context of my organization. It might work for yours, it might not. But overall, like there are a ton of ways to do this, and it really doesn't matter how you get to where you're going as long as the outcomes are the same. That's my perspective anyway, that you want to make sure your team has alignment on the why, that issues are raised up front, that you're building the right thing, and that you're testing what you build. And then again, like for the context of my org, like we have teams that are multidisciplinary. We don't have a separate QA team. We don't have directors giving us like top-down stuff that we have to build, and we have direct access to our users. So like your mileage may vary with all of this stuff, but I hope that there's some things in here that you might be able to tease out or think of how you might be able to work with designers and developers more cohesively throughout your feature lifecycle and your product management practice. So with that, if there's any questions, I'm sorry, organizers, for going a little bit long, but I will open the chat now.
Yeah, so I'll give you, I can read out the questions for you. It might be easier.
Okay.
And if it's not, let me know. So the first question in the chat was from Benoit de Lean. Size of your team. You mentioned 1 PM, UXR, UX dev, policy manager if needed.
Yeah, my team right now is 6 people, 6 or 7, and it varies on the scope of the work. But yeah, at least one of those, probably 2 designers, 2 developers.
Next question from Benoit as well is, do you have exactly 1 person of each craft, always / sometimes, or it depends? You kind of answered that already. Do you want to get into it a little bit more?
It depends again on the size and like where we are in the product life cycle. So recently my team is gearing up for a release, so we brought on someone that is more well versed in DevOps. But when we're back in early discovery, we might be more like service designer heavy. So it depends, but we'll have at least 1.
Okay. Benoit, is there anything you wanted to follow up on that, or did your question get answered? And you can unmute if you want to.
Yeah, so yeah, I think thank you for the talk. It was super interesting. Yeah, so my question was, do you really start all the discovery process with all the team day 1, or sometimes do you have only certain craft?
Ideally, everyone is there from day 1, and our work is, since we're working in governments, part of the discovery is we work with the government departments, and part of the discovery is like figuring out how that department works. So developers are looking at like what are the current release practices and processes that happen in that department, but they are also like directly involved with research and starting to think about how we might be able to prototype some ideas to test any hypotheses that come out. It helps to have people that are really willing to engage in other disciplines and that are interested in being on a multidisciplinary team and like wearing a bunch of hats.
So the next question is from Guillaume Clement. What do you do first, I guess? Research / know what to research first? I may be reading this or like really poorly, so Guillaume, if you want to clarify, please go ahead and unmute yourself. I'm reading literal text, so.
Yeah, the second part is a clarification here. So what do you know, or how do you know what to research first? Mostly the chart started at the research stage, so kind of understanding what comes before that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So we will start out with the problem area and a discovery phase where we go in and look at like what is the current flow, what is the current journey that people are going through and experiencing, and then we try and identify like where the problem areas are and where we're able to kind of intervene and build something to make the whole journey better. So we'll come up with some hypotheses for what I'm working on right now. part of the problem was that we identified through research, where we're just trying to like talk to all the different users and get their experience and then map it out and see where the problem areas are. And that helps us to dive in a little bit deeper. But we were trying to figure out how the processing staff could get the information from applicants up front. So then we started to prototype different ways of like asking the questions a little bit differently and look at how doctors would be filling that out. So it starts with some like lightweight prototypes, and we'll start with doing research of concept testing rather than like specific features or usability. What I showed here is more of our cycle when we have a little bit of a more mature product where we're looking more at usability. But we'll just do, our researcher will put together a test plan to go through and see like if people are able to complete the key tasks that we identify as like what does success mean for the product. Are they able to successfully move through it? That was a long-winded answer that covered a lot, but I hope that I got it.
I hope that helped and it clarified things for your question, Guillaume. Then I will let everyone know that I see Lisa Cormier is the last question that was just posted, and then we try and get through the next 4 questions, and we'll cut it off at that point just because we did go overboard. Went over time. So the next question is, oh yeah.
Aisha, sorry, if it helps, I can also respond over text as we move on to.
Sure, how about after Lisa's question? And we will spend
Sure.
another 5 minutes to answer the rest of the questions.
Okay.
Excuse me. So the next question is, do all of your decisions go through the decision Trello board?
Ideally, yes. But these are any decisions that are made based off of research will go through the decision Trello board. There are decisions that sometimes need to be made, or like stories that will come about that are not born out of research, and then those will just go straight onto the backlog.
I'm figuring it might make sense for me to take over reading the questions just because she's busy. So next one was, are you doing any reviews with stakeholders of your designs prior to development rather than after, so that you can adjust the work according to their feedback?
So we're really lucky that our team is pretty empowered and that we don't have a lot of fingers in our pie at this level of work. But we do have our bi-weekly sprint review where stakeholders are invited, and then they'll get a chance to see designs at that point. But we don't do any stakeholder design review with folks outside the team.
Gotcha. And I missed one here. Is there any user testing done before code is started with low fidelity prototypes or otherwise?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We would definitely want to do some low fidelity prototypes if we were looking at a more complicated intervention or a complicated feature or something that would like significantly change the flow. I think it depends on the type of story that you're looking at and whether it makes sense to do some more like preliminary testing. And it's also like how like confident you are that it's going to work. If you're really not confident, definitely go ahead and do some low fidelity prototypes. But if it's a small change, like the example that I showed, I don't think you really need to.
Gotcha. And then last one here before we move on. How long are your research and design phases? And this is multi-part, so I'll let you address the following parts after that because you can see it too.
Cool. So our discovery is about 8 weeks, but I wouldn't really call it a research and design phase. That's like when we're looking into like what the problem area is and coming up with some hypotheses that we would want to test and like ideas for what we would want to build. We work in 2-week sprints, so we're mostly Scrum, and sometimes that bleeds into Kanban, but we're mostly Scrum and working in 2-week sprints of doing research either every sprint or every other sprint, and then the design and development just happen within sequence of that. So we're doing design and development each sprint. And do you only start Scrum in development phases or once you form it? So yeah, so we're using Scrum in the sprint framework throughout the whole thing. Okay, and I'm just going to read out Bruno's question of how do you define success for an intervention? That is such a great question. As we're working through things and writing the user stories, we're thinking about how we're going to measure it. And either if we're looking at a live product and we're able to measure it through telemetry and data through Google Analytics and stuff like that, we'll want to call that out. Or if it's something that we just bring forward into our next research session. So through metrics.
Great. Thank you so much for that awesome presentation and answering all our viewers' questions. It's funny to say viewers because we're virtual. So now the next thing we have planned for everybody is just a little bit of a break and a funny activity. Let me just make this full screen. So kind of inspired by the idea of the many hats that a product manager wears, we are hoping that everyone can get up and go look for an accessory of some kind. Doesn't have to be vegetables or fruits, as you see in this. So step one, find an accessory, hat, scarf, plant, whatever makes sense. And then step two, put it on. I do notice that a lot of the videos are turned off. We would really love it if you could turn your videos on. And then we would like to take a screenshot of all of us attending this first virtual product tank. So let's see if we can get to that. Any questions? I don't know if this hat is going to actually fit over this thing, but this is what I tried.
I love it.
All right, I'm looking at the gallery view. It's happening.
So honestly,
Very creative, Courtney.
Yogurt bowl, would that work?
Yep, all the way, Malik.
Fitting here.
All right.
No.
I love it. Oh, I see a fire.
Yeah, we got some people who are finding stuff. Some people may be further than from hats than others.
Yep. Awesome.
Evelyn, yours is particularly fantastic. I just want to call you up. The wine is a nice accessory as well.
Yeah, I guess I should accessorize with my coffee. There we go. Okay.
Jonathan, do you have a fire helmet on? Like a firefighter's helmet, it looks like. Yeah, nice.
Yeah. I see bunny ears on Bruno. I have no idea. There's a pink hat on Arpita. Do you want to tell us what that is?
That's rabbit's, I don't know, ear, something like that.
Yeah, these are all great.
Awesome. Okay, does anyone have the ability to take screenshots quickly? Actually, I could do that too.
Yes, I can also.
Okay, let's try. A few people do Command-Shift-3.
Oh yeah, everybody can just smile for a couple of minutes. Lovely.
Excellent.
Normally I would have a cat on my lap and he just ran away. Otherwise we'd have him too.
All right, so before we go back to our program, I want to give everyone a minute or two to get themselves a drink, whether that be wine to follow Evelyn's example, or tea or coffee or beer, what floats your boat. And then in a minute, we will go back to the regular program.
Julie, you're looking very festive. I thought I'd call you out as well.
I also love that we have a dog. I think it's Mel Taylor's dog. Uh-oh. Mike, I didn't get your introduction in there in time, so I'll just have to read it out. Unless you want to introduce yourself, go for it.
Yeah, I can do it, but I might actually do it in the presentation because I have a little slide about myself there, so we can just move it to the main section.
Perfect. I will. Let's just go ahead and do that then. Stop sharing so you can go ahead and share your screen. All yours.
1 second, I need to okay, now for some reason, okay, yeah. Okay, so hi, I'm Mike Malewicz, and I'm gonna tell you about my journey that has been through remote work quite a lot. But first, let me introduce myself a little bit. I'm a designer and author of a design book, and I've been actually working in design since 1999. And I've been exploring remote work since 2009 when I stopped working at agencies and went freelance. In 1999, the design tools were pretty rough, but and of course the collaboration or communication tools were also even worse. So most of the stuff that we're using today, most of the stuff is the backbone of what we do, weren't even imagined at that time. So I'm the CEO of Hype4, which is a design-driven development agency at the moment, and we have worked with some larger clients and some smaller startups as well. And yeah, let's go back to the story, because I wanted to do it in the form of a story of how my approach to work in general changed. So when I went freelance in 2009, I'm a designer, so basically I was a one-person team working from home. And I found that there are a lot of little problems that happen when you worked at the office for 10 years and then you transition to actually being your own little company. And aside from finding clients, which is of course at that stage pretty much the hardest part, I found out that it was really hard to focus for me. Like I needed to very concentrate very hard to accomplish even the simplest things. I kept pushing simple tasks till later, like something that I could do in 5 minutes, I pushed to tomorrow or the day after that. So in general, I had pretty bad organizational skills, and that led to some form of lack of motivation. And at the same time, staying at home, and because of that moving of the tasks around and kind of not being organized, I didn't have a lot of time to go out with friends and be social because I needed to deliver a project for tomorrow. So that also impacted my life. So the funny thing about my time at that moment is that I was working crazy hours, but it was mostly because I wasn't really efficient at what I was doing. So I was working for an hour or two in the morning, then I was distracted by something or wasn't motivated enough to work, and then I returned to work after a few hours and then worked some more. So in general, it just spread my day across many hours, and I wasn't really feeling like I was accomplishing a lot, but I was surely sleeping not quite enough. So okay, but then after a while, we transitioned to working from home as a 3-person team. And at that time, we were still design only, so just 3 designers. And we tried to organize it a little bit more as we started getting clients. So of course, it couldn't be like a free-for-all, and it couldn't be like crazy times from 8 a.m. till midnight. So we decided to create the sort of hours that we work within, usually starting at 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. So some people just started a little earlier, some people started later. But we were doing Skype stand-ups. At the time, Skype was the only tool that allowed for video calls and very good audio. And what we tried to push forward at the very beginning was also that everybody is responsible for their own work, meaning that since we're a small company and we're not really having like a managerial structure. Everybody is actually handling also annotating the project that they're doing, writing about it to the customer, and just attaching me to the email. But it still led to crunches and to very long days sometimes. Plus, what we've learned at the very beginning is that it kind of gives you the need to rely on other people that they're gonna do their job right, and it doesn't always happen that way. So if you're not in the same place and you're expecting responsibility for their own work, they might give you something at the end of the day that is not possible to be sent to the client. So there were nights that I had to actually just redo something because I got a project that just wasn't good enough. And yeah, we were also taking random breaks and trying different things like working from coffee shops, working from while traveling, and then communicating with other people through Skype and through email wasn't really that optimal. Yeah, but there was some sort of planning involved, at least because my freelance years were pretty much a free-for-all, and it was very, very bad. So, for example, we started working on a mobile game back in 2012. And yeah, we started doing things like kind of pushing the remote work to the extremes and trying to work from like anywhere that we could. And for example, a blanket in the park, while it's a very nice weather outside, of course, it's awesome to just sit outside and have a coffee or tea or whatever, or a beer sometimes, and just work on a project. But as you can see on the screen, you didn't really actually, you weren't really able to see a lot of the details of what you're working on. So it was mostly just kind of pretending to work. So that was a bad idea. And of course, it wasn't really a regular thing, but we sometimes tried to actually, that's why we took those photos, and we tried to feel like we're living the life of like a small freelance company, working remotely quite a lot, and just like when everybody's rotting, parentheses, in their offices, we're sitting outside and being not very productive actually. Another thing that I don't recommend is a lot of energy drinks, and there are the better ones and the worse ones. We actually switched from Red Bulls and all those not too healthy ones into ones that are mostly yerba mate based, but still it's actually adding a lot of caffeine, more than a couple of coffees. So we were able to work quite a lot, but still those health benefits weren't really there. And another thing was that since we worked remotely, and sometimes we had a larger project to deliver, we had to do meetups sometimes. We had to meet in person. And those meetings, due to the sort of separated nature of our normal work, weren't really easy to set up, because you couldn't, like, if somebody is working completely remotely, they're not really that easy to convince to come at a specific time. And also they probably share some of the same problems with being able to steadily work for a couple hours and then just get it done. So we ended up working with an external developer that is in the background there, sometimes until like 3 or 4 a.m. on some days to deliver the product on time. And of course, probably the normal office work would have been a lot more organized, because we would be seeing each other for 8 hours in the morning and not the developer coming in at like 3 p.m. and basically we were working from the morning on our design side. But at some point I started transitioning from the fully remote work to dedicating one room from my home into a makeshift office. So we just put some little tables and some computer screens there, so people could work when we had a deadline. We could come in for like 3 or 4 days, and then it went back to being a little bit more relaxed for the rest of the time. Okay. Yeah, sometimes we worked late into the night, and that used to be the norm. And sometimes we actually even worked drinking a beer and feeling the sort of benefits of being our own boss, but it wasn't really that productive either. But it actually, we transformed the company at some point because we started seeing that it's basically not, all those things weren't really helping. So we started implementing some things that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. And actually that led us to design 500 plus projects. And each one of those screens is one different project that we did. And those are about like 400 of them or 300 or something. But this is just one screen, and most of those products have more than one screen. So we designed that many things with 3 people in 8 years, but that's because we actually started implementing some of the things that made this work. So before I get to those things, I want to go back to the sort of growing of the company and how we shifted it. So our first office was 7 people, 1 office, and we had remote work pretty normal. And we started actually hiring our own developers because as designers, when we were working with external companies and sending them designs, we realized that 99% of the time they are just completely butchered. And they're just implementing something in the sort of developer way of it displays on the screen, so it's okay. And we weren't really happy with that sloppy approach that's pretty normal. So we actually started hiring our own developers, teaching them design. And at the same time, and this actually helped us a lot with remote working as well, we started moving away from counting hours, which is basically, like, of course, you need to estimate how long it will take you to do a particular task or a project. And if you say something is going to take today, and then you finish it in 4 hours because you had a good streak or you just went very fast and managed to do it well, then you don't need to stick around on Slack and basically you can just go have fun. So people started actually speeding up a little bit. Of course, not to the extent of being unreliable or bad quality, but actually people were able to actually finish work an hour or 2 earlier on most days. And then we started first experiments with actually having like a week or a month in some cases of working from home with some of the employees. And that has proven to be both good and bad. Some of them were really good at it, and some of them it turned out that they were actually working on other projects on our time and being late with most of the stuff that they were doing. But we set the office to be like a little bit like home, so we kind of decorated it with the photos of everybody working there. We had Nerf guns and all that stuff. But it got crowded pretty quickly, so we started actually moving more people to remote work at the time because it was basically just a lot of people on a pretty small space, and people were mostly happy with it. But because of the sort of quick growth, we actually had some projects that were more of the core team of the company. And while the rest were working from home, we actually had to come to the office on Saturdays and Sundays sometimes to just catch up on things. But the good thing is that better tools actually allowed us for better collaboration. And at some point, there were tools that you could have feedbacking for designs and prototyping that's much faster. So a lot of the time that previously was spent on drawing those lines yourselves and explaining on Skype videos to people how to interpret them, you can actually do a working prototype in 30 minutes and send it to the customer, and then you can add comments there. And yeah, years later, the laptop screens got better, so we could actually work on that same on the same grass that the first photo was taken. Still not a great idea because it's too distracting, but it was a little bit more manageable. But still, while we were working remotely, actually we all live in kind of pretty close to each other. So we meet up at a cafe that actually we started meeting at the very beginnings of the company. And we actually just go through projects together, have a coffee, and share some laughs. And yeah, it's just a relaxed half day, basically. So yeah, currently we have a new office that's 14 people, but since January 20th, everyone is working remotely. And because of the processes that the developers have and all the tools that the designers use, we're actually able to pull it off pretty well. What we use is, of course, Slack, and we use a stand-up bot, which is basically a bot that is asking everybody a question: what are you gonna be working today or working on today, and what are the potential things that might make it difficult for you, and if somebody can help you. And then we're using Trello for basically managing the simpler tasks, and we're using our own tool called Task for time and task tracking. We built it because we didn't find anything that was good for us. For most tools, we're using Skype, but like whoever invites us to something, we're just gonna use that tool. So that's not that essential. But Slack and the stand-up bot is what's making most of the difference. And for design, we're using Sketch and InVision, and InVision especially, it's maybe not the best anymore. Well, for us, it still is, but it might not be the most feature-rich. But it allows us to actually send designs. The customer can add comments in context on specific things and elements, and then we can implement those comments, re-upload the screen automatically, and it shows in the new place. We check the comment as finished. So basically, that's the entire process that normally feedback would take through emails and trying to understand what somebody means and things like that. It's just happening a lot faster through that. So right now our approach is project, not time driven. So we basically estimate the time to do a project, but if somebody does it faster, then that's okay. And yeah, that estimation is essential. Okay, so here are some tips, because I don't know, because I'm full screen, how long do I have? So some little tips that I actually use to make my life more productive, because as you've seen before, it wasn't that productive before. So first thing is using a to-do list, because actually checking off a to-do list is providing almost the same type of dopamine hit that when you get a notification on a social media site, which is basically feeling awesome, unstoppable, and all that. And all those things around here are the things that I'm saying to myself when I'm checking off another little task. And the Pomodoro technique, which is pretty obvious, it's actually dividing your work into short sprints of like 30 to 35 minutes, and then adding a 5-minute cool down time where you don't do work for just that time, and then you go back immediately. And after a couple of those, like 3 or 4, you do a slightly longer break. And that allows you to be focused for 30 minutes or 35 minutes and then be relaxed and then come back to the state. Another thing that I did is banning notifications, because I'm not in customer service, so I don't need to answer emails most of the time. I'm answering my email once at noon every day. That takes me about 20 minutes, and then at the very end of the day, another time, maybe 15 minutes. And I don't go into email, and I have all my notifications turned off both on my phone and my computer. And one thing that we found particularly important right now while working remotely, especially with a larger group of people, is that it's important to actually send memes on Slack and have the relaxed atmosphere. So when people are laughing together at something, it actually makes it a lot more sort of, the normally lacking social connection that you don't have while working remotely. It's brought back because of that. So I've heard that some companies are actually banning Slack jokes and memes, and I think that they are essential for the good atmosphere and for having people both productive and happy. And the last thing for me is basically do great work. So you need to focus on the thing that why are you actually working in that field or area? If you're working there just to make money, then it might not be a good fit for you. But if you're really trying to achieve something good, trying to do something very well, very nicely, and be really proud of it, then I think that it's quite possible for you to work remotely, because you will be self-driven to basically do very well. Yeah, and that's it. And hopefully I'm not very much over time. You can follow me at Medium at the Michal Malewicz part here. And you can check out our book and our website under these links. So thank you.
Thank you. Great presentation. And you're only slightly over time. That's okay. Courtney was slightly over time as well. But we are changing up, because originally we had planned that we would get you and Sheri to do Q&A together, but respecting the fact that, you know, you are in Poland and probably going to be offline in 15 minutes, I think what we'll do is address your questions first. And there is quite a few in the chat. Do you want to read through them yourself, or would you like me or someone else to read them out to you? Noelle helped previously. What's better for you?
Well, I can try to go through them one by one. Just trying to find which one is the first one.
Me too. Same thing.
Yes,
Before I had the. Noelle, are you go?
Yeah,
go
I'm all over it. I got it.
Perfect.
So Andrea's question was the first question, so I can read that one to you if you'd like, and then we can anchor ourselves at that point in the chat.
Sure.
So Andrea's question was, why did you think sometimes you needed to meet in person, and what was the benefit to meeting in person versus meeting on Slack or on Skype or Zoom?
Yeah. Okay. So in the very early days, I think the main benefits was that some of the projects were very intensive in the sense of being like a lot of quick decisions between people. Like one person did one thing very quickly, and then the other person had to act upon that. So it wasn't something that you could accomplish really easily remotely, because there is some lag between, you know, sending something to people and then receiving and understanding. So we tried actually to only meet when it was absolutely necessary in the beginnings, and we found out that it's like a healthy mix of meeting sometimes. It's also pretty good for the collaboration. So we started meeting a little bit more often because of that, but it still was mostly remote.
Makes sense. Next question was, how do you check in with yourself and your team to determine how your productivity practices and tools are serving you guys?
Okay, yeah, so we're doing, first of all, we're doing the stand-up every day. And aside from that, we're actually doing a progress report every 6 months, trying to analyze, because people are adding time that it takes them to do specific things, and then we can actually sort of assert their quality of those things that they did in the specific time. And based on that, basically our goal is to give everybody a raise every 6 months. It sometimes doesn't work because they didn't just meet their goals, but it very rarely actually happens. Most of the people get a raise every 6 months because we're actually able to track that they're doing better and better, and everybody is growing with the company.
Great. Next one is, when you changed to count hours worked by developers, did you also change your business model with clients to not charge by the hour? So when you moved to like project-based versus what you're getting done, did you also change how you charged clients?
Okay, yeah, so the thing is that we actually still estimated time with the developers as well. So the clients were getting hours because it's much easier for them to grasp. And the sort of change was only on our side. So when we estimated the hours, the developers knew that if they actually make the product faster than that, they had free time for the same money. So it was mostly for the company, not for the customers. But I think that it's possible to charge on basically project or the impact of the project or the value of the project, but it's not really that easy for everybody to understand that, and people are much better at understanding ours. I have an example of that because I'm very fast in designing at the moment after those 20 years, and I'm even doing live events when I redesign an app from scratch, one screen in 1 hour in front of an audience, and just working next. And that kind of shows that, okay, so if you can redesign an app in 1 hour, then maybe basically all the work is worth 1 hour of your time. So how much should I value 1 hour of my time if I'm that fast? And basically for most people, it would take maybe 16 hours to do pretty much the same thing. So I'm still trying to estimate like a standard time it would take most people to do something.
This is tied to the next question too. The next question was was about estimation. So yeah, how, like, do you have a process for estimating the amount of time it will take for complex projects? And are there any tricks you would like to share regarding do's and don'ts of complex project estimation?
Yeah, first of all, you need to divide them because everything that's complex is actually a sum of its parts. So it's best to try to estimate the parts. And what we're actually trying to also do is to set milestones and only estimate and stick to like one or two milestones at first to see how the cooperation with the customer will look like. So we've made quite a lot of projects, so we're pretty good at trying or predicting how long it will take us to do something. But of course, there is the sort of customer feedback part that is pretty impossible to estimate. So we're trying to do a sprint or two or a milestone or two first, and then based on that, we kind of add some little percentage change to the initial estimations. But there are really no tricks to estimating an IT project because basically all of them are never estimated with enough hours, and that's basically a fact. Yeah. So it's just important to not go overboard too much, I think.
Gotcha. If anyone's question was missed, then they can hop on, but I think that I have addressed all of them that were in the chat.
I think so too. Anyone want to ask one last question, or if we missed it, please go ahead and ask. And I'll start switching to sharing my screen to introducing Sheri. Okay. All right. I don't see a question come up in the chat, so I think we're good to go. Thank you so much, Mike. So next up is Sheri. Sheri Zelle is a technology marketing executive who has spent 20 years working with startups and global brands like Corel, Yahoo, and Symantec. And in the past decade, she's been managing teams remotely. She currently leads product marketing for Pier 39, and it's an ad tech company based out of New York. Sheri's deep love for product marketing and go-to-market strategy drive her efforts to evangelize the role and discipline of product marketing so companies can more efficiently and effectively bring products to market. Sheri will be sharing her learnings and insights and best practices, as well as tools from her remote experience with all of us. And that's to do with both large and small organizations. So take it away, Sheri. Oh, is Sheri still on? Just in case she got disconnected, let's have a quick look.
She's on the list.
She might have dropped off. Let's give her a couple of minutes. And I'll also ping her directly just in case there's a technical.
I can see her.
Okay, great.
Oh, and her video's turned off. Hey, Sheri, are you there? I don't know if you heard, yeah, I don't know if you just heard Sheri speak up, but she's quite eager to talk to everyone. So.
It says, no, I have no sound or video. Not sure what got switched off. Okay, I think as organizers, we could turn on your video and see if that works. I don't have the full list here. Let me just find you. Let's see. I don't actually see you in the list. Anybody else
I can see her video. Her mouth is moving, but I can't hear anything that she's saying. So
Yeah,
yeah, I can see Sheri too.
Okay, for me, she drops off.
Oh, she dropped off just now.
But yeah, maybe she would
for me,
rejoin.
It's coming in and out.
Yeah, she was in and out earlier. So hopefully, if she drops out and rejoins, we should be good to go.
Great. Let's give her a couple of minutes to do that. Yeah, challenges of working remotely. Okay, while we're waiting, maybe I can skip ahead a little bit and share the jokes I had planned for later, because that will fill in the couple of minutes that we have here.
Sounds great.
Let's go here. And so here we go. That will be, okay, so I don't know how many of you have come across this hashtag. It was started by a popular blogger on Twitter. So product management bar joke. He was inspired by a bar joke for QA folks. And so his name is Jeff Lash, in case you're wondering. And so here are a few of the top jokes related to that hashtag on Twitter. Product manager walks into a bar, sees someone who looks thirsty, offers to buy them a drink. Product manager orders, pays, spends 30 minutes describing drink. Person responds they weren't actually thirsty and don't like half the ingredients anyway. Next one was submitted by Susie Prince. A product manager walks into a bar, asks what people want to drink, and then orders what they really wanted. And the last one that I put on here, a product manager walks into a bar, pours drinks, waits tables, cleans toilets, and puts out fire in the stockroom. Feel free to share any other product manager walks into a bar joke in the chat, or if Sheri isn't ready, then feel free to submit it or unmute yourself. It's a fun hashtag to follow too on Twitter if you want to.
Great. I can see Sheri. Can you hear us? Okay, so she can hear us, but we cannot hear her. If you try to present your screen, Sheri, does it come up? If you're doing it now, we cannot see it. Can't hear you, unfortunately.
Oh no. Okay, so you know what I will do? If Sheri, you can work on just calling in maybe, because there's a phone number associated with the Zoom meeting as well.
Better?
But I can do it.
Oh, we can hear you now.
Yay.
Hooray.
Right. Okay, so I think sharing is, it says host disabled attendee screen sharing. So if you want to open that up, I can share my screen.
Sure, yes, we will make you a co-host and then you should be able to
there you go.
share things. There you go.
I was just about to say, Andrew, please.
Technology. There we go. All right. Do this one. Perfect. And do this one. Can you see? Yes. Nope, you're seeing the wrong one. Yes, you're seeing the right one.
Yes, I can see. Yep.
So just single screen, you're not seeing the next screen.
No, nope, just seeing one slide that says insights from over a decade of working remotely.
Okay, all right. So quickly, I'll speak fast. So I started working remotely in 2008, and it was for a company based in California, and then enjoyed it so much and ended up with a really strong network down there. I continued to do so for a few years. One of the things about remote working before all this coronavirus stuff is I love working remote. It's definitely a privilege, and it's my happiest way to work, I think. So I wanted to share some of the numbers, right? So aside from all the coronavirus and aside from making everybody work remotely now, it's something that's getting traction, especially in North America and some parts of Europe. And I just wanted to share some of the numbers. So 2/3 of the majority of professionals work at home at least one day a week. there's research that's proving that there's a higher level of productivity. So, 13% more productive, which may not sound like a lot, but if you calculate that over the course of a year, it's pretty significant for businesses. There's been 159% growth in just the adoption of remote working in the last 3 years alone. Many of the North American companies that are starting up and have established themselves actually have no physical headquarters. So there's no building for any employee to go to, and they never had it. They started out remote from the beginning. Many of the companies are smaller in size. When they start out, remote makes a lot of sense. And then just the cost savings. So, as an employee, if you think about going into an office, you have to pay for parking and commute and the wear and tear on your car, and then lunches and clothes and dry cleaning and all that other stuff. And there's significant cost savings in addition to just time and your life. And then there's the cost savings on the side of the employer as well. I remember one company I worked for down in Mountain View, and when I would visit, if they were moving people from cube to cube, there was this huge process to go through, and it cost $11,000 to move one person from the cube on this side of the aisle to the other side of the aisle. It was the most asinine thing ever. So there's significant cost savings. I'll apologize in advance for all of the text, but I had no time for photos. So there's a lot of things I've learned over the years, spending a dozen years or so remote. This is probably more true now than ever, but we're all human and life is unpredictable. And if we look around at what the coronavirus is doing and causing in terms of anxiety and stress and disruption, it becomes sort of a new state of normal. So I think that's an important perspective to keep. You will inevitably, working remotely, if you have pets or children or spouses, inevitably they will always find their way into one of your most important video calls, which I have. When my daughter was younger, I was presenting to a senior executive a launch plan, and my daughter came barreling in through the door and had just got home from swimming and had like chocolate brownie all over her face. And the senior executive was on the screen and just sort of said, "Oh, hello," and my daughter froze. But you'll always find them finding their way into your sessions. And technology is great until it lets you down, which it often does. And tonight's, no short of an example of that. Yeah, and back-to-back meetings, that's probably one of my favorite things. Is I remember one of the times I worked for Yahoo, and the campus they had in Mountain View was 8 buildings. And so people would book back-to-back meetings, and you had to get from one building to another when they were literally starting and stopping one right after the other. So, you can hang up and dial back in. It is definitely possible to get promoted and work your way up through your career. It's not always an individual contributor's kind of function. So it's definitely a path. Mute is your best friend. And I mean mute from your voice as well as your face, as some people who know me. It's really important to know where that button is on all of the conference calls. Like we said earlier, in terms of the productivity, you definitely will get a whole lot more done. The size of coffee mug matters. So this one is specifically to, I was on a conference call, my team was gathered in Mountain View, and we had people coming in from all over the place. And so they have these big monitors, and I wasn't able to travel there. So I was remote, and I was dialing into a conference call. And I was drinking from this coffee cup that I had that was probably about this big around. And so as you can imagine, every time you took a sip, it would cover your whole face. And what I didn't realize was that my picture from the screen was the only one up there. So literally this cup was covering my face, and the picture of my head was like this big. So it does matter, the size. Fluorescent lights suck, they're evil. Clarity is key. One of the most important things, I think, for work and for just personal life. The right technology for the job is an important one. I think specifically because there's so much now available in the past few years that have emerged for making it easier to work remotely. The challenge is ensuring that you have agreement and alignment on what tool for what job, and that everybody understands what you're going to use when. What do you share in Slack, and what do you share in email? What do you share in some of the other collaboration tools that you have? And the biggest thing is really life is so much better when you take the commute away. I can't stand traffic, and it's a very tough thing to go back to. I think it would be hard pressed to have me commute back. So I have like 4 slides. I know, too long, didn't read. But these are the things I think that are really important, in that you need to really create that space for your work, because I think if you don't create the space, then you're blending sort of work and life. And so these next 3 bullets kind of blend together. You really have to get up and start your day as if you're going to head to the office, because it's a mindset. It's also how you feel. It's how you present yourself. And, you know, the more we use video conferencing, that's really important. You know, separating your work and your home is just an extension of that, having a space, right? So having a delineation, it's super easy when you work from home and have an office where it just kind of never goes off, or you finish dinner, you just want to pop back in. But it's important to kind of, you know, draw those lines, which sometimes I'm not very good at, depending on the projects I'm on. Planning your day, you know, managing, aligning expectations. This one is big because it gives you orientation around where your head is focused. And especially when you're remote, it's super easy to get distracted because there's never any shortage of work. But if you have an idea of what it is you want to accomplish, I have a document, a Google document that I open, and it's opened every day. And it's basically, you know, plans and objectives for this coming week. And then I color code it. So it gets added to, and it's just tracking. So I color coded for green, things that are completed, you know, red, things that are not started, and then yellow for things that are started and not completed. And that way, anything that sort of didn't get done this week rolls into the next week. And then I have, you know, an area to kind of tack the stuff for next week. There's lots of different ways to do that, but this works really well because it's quick. You know, there's not a lot of time suck in terms of the planning. Accountability framework. So that goes back to kind of the aligning expectations, prioritizing, deprioritizing. I know you guys presented, had presenters last month on Moscow, but any sort of decision, you know, accountability framework is really important, because then there's clarity again around who's going to do what, when. Catching up, you know, staying in touch. I think you want to err on the side of over communicating, transparent around progression and when you're available and what your workload is, because I think in a remote case, there is this sense of, because you're not seen, people don't think that the work, or you're not working, because there's that old mentality of, if your manager can't see you there, then you're clearly not working, you're out at the movies or something. So it's really important to provide that visibility and transparency, and then the intentionality of over communicating. So if you think you've said enough, then say it again, like share it again, either through Slack, or make sure there's visibility into what your plans are or what you're tracking against. You know, turning off the notifications. I know Mike had said that earlier. That's huge, because there's research that shows that for every distraction, when someone comes up to you at the office and says, hey, do you got a minute? And that minute takes 5 or 15 or longer. And then to recover from that interruption takes about 15 minutes to get your head back to where you were the moment they interrupted you. So if you're, you know, heads down and working on something, put your notification on in Slack and let people know that you'll get back to them within a certain period, or you're just not reachable. This is an important one. As we saw tonight, right? Video calls, they work sometimes and sometimes they don't. So taking the extra time to start, and especially when it's for leadership or your executives and you're presenting to them, you know, get settled, get started, sound checks, all that great stuff. Mind your backdrop. So the big thing is, especially now as more and more people are doing it, is it's important to not, I get it, we're all working from home, but nobody wants to see the pile of dishes or laundry or, you know, other things that just sort of don't seem sort of work appropriate, or a little too personal. And, you know, there's lots of tools in Zoom that can give you backgrounds and things like that. There's even pop-up ones that I know some people use. So mind your background. Yeah, turn off messages. I can't tell you the number of times in managing teams where presentations are going off and messages are popping up that can sometimes be a little disruptive or embarrassing, to say the least. A central place to record your work, so that goes back to the transparency and visibility and planning. Calendar blocking, continual learning. Oh yeah, water jug and clear glass. So the other side of the big coffee mug is the idea of if you have a big water bottle and you've got a day of say 6 or 7 meetings, the challenge is to go out and get more water, or you know, you have this big bottle in your face every time you're drinking. So, you know, clear glass and a jug that you can keep filling it up so that if you don't have a chance to run out, to fill it up. And then the one challenge around remote is the relationships and conversations that are happening. And they're usually, you know, quite serendipitous. So you're heating up your lunch, you're passing someone in a hallway you haven't seen for a while. And those happen pretty naturally when you're face to face. And so you have to do it sort of very consciously when you're remote. And you can do that through virtual coffee catch-ups, right? So schedule 5 or 10 minutes, you make a coffee, have a video call with someone. For a while, I was remote and in California for a bit, and I would actually do sort of wine o'clock with friends, and it's all done virtually. So it's a little bit more difficult, but it definitely can be done, and you can create those water cooler moments by just, you know, being very cognizant of it. And then in terms of managing teams, one thing that I did do was create this sense of a virtual cube. So I had a team of 9, and we were distributed all across the US and Canada. And we didn't get a lot of time face to face, but we were a really close team. And one of the things that I implemented was this Friday virtual cube idea, right? So Fridays, typically people are standing around a little bit more social, asking about what's happening over the course of the weekends and plans, and it's just pretty chill. Nobody's got any agenda. So I would put a chunk of time, it was 90 minutes, it was on everyone's calendar on Friday mornings. It wasn't mandatory, but it was, you know, pop in, pop out at any time, and you could have it on the whole time and just do email or catch up. And it was just sort of this virtual cube of people to connect and socialize and get to know each other and just kind of, you know, humanize the whole experience. For the record, I had intended to put entire logos here, but didn't I ran out of time. But so these, over the course of the decade or 12 years I've been doing it, there's a few things that I absolutely love and I would be hard pressed to live without, whether I was remote or otherwise. But in a remote environment, it's really important. And some tools like this are like noise canceling headphones. You know, some of you have them. They're super important, and not just for living at home and working with family and friends and everything kind of being on each other with coronavirus, but I find they're really useful, especially when I'm home and you know, there's construction or noise outside, or it also allows you to kind of go into a bubble and shut all of that out. So those are really good. A great microphone and speaker, which is like this Jabra Speak, that's what this is. It's portable, it's a microphone and a speaker. I take it everywhere I go, it's fantastic. When you're remote, this is maybe less so of importance because now Starbucks has taken away all their chairs and all the restaurants are closed. But you know, a remote worker and this ability to protect the work that you're doing by having like a 3M privacy screen, and that just means that no one who's sitting other than 90 degrees of the screen can see what you're doing. So it keeps their noses out of your spreadsheets or your presentations or whatever you're writing. Webcam, privacy cover, back to the whole mute your face, mute your voice. Just, it's a little sticker that covers the camera, really important. Monitor stands for your laptop or your monitor. You know, the challenge with laptops and being remote, a lot of people put them in their lap or put them on a coffee table or something lower, which means the camera is looking up your face. So raising that up, I think, is definitely critical and useful. A good chair. You spend so much of your time of the day in a chair, unless you have a stand-up desk, and then you need a really good mat. But a really good chair is great. I put a sheepskin, you know, sheepskin rug on mine just for comfort and when it's cold in the winter, because we live in Canada. Lighting is hugely important. Do not disturb on the side, you know, on your door if you're fortunate enough to have an office, or a signal, like if you're working in shared accommodations. some sort of indicator that, you know, you're not disturbable, if you will. Headphone stand, it keeps it off my desk, and then I know where it is and I don't have to dig for it. And my iPad, I put all of my notes in my iPad. I don't carry a notebook anywhere anymore, and I never have to worry about not having access to it, regardless of where I am in the world, because it's all synced across my devices. And then this is not an exhaustive list of the technologies, but you know, there's a ton of ways to stay in touch and stay synchronized with your team or anyone else for that matter. There's lots of different ways to collaborate as well. You know, Mind Manager is an awesome tool. I don't know how many people here know about it, but we're really fortunate. Corel acquired it in the last few years. It's a tool I've used for a really long time. Yeah, mind mapping is like mind-blowing, if that makes any sense. And I want to, you know, give everybody just go try it, go download it and try it, because yeah, to get it all out and not worry about linear thinking, and just it's so freeing, and it changes the way brainstorming and all of that can work, as well as managing projects and teams. You know, then there's Lucid Charts and Miro, and those are awesome as well. Then you've got all of your scheduling, and I'm sure there's a ton more. But the whole idea is finding technology that's going to help you share, collaborate, create transparency, you know, create visibility into what you're doing. And that's important too, because you don't want to do the work and then not have anyone see or understand the degree to which the effort was put into it or the value to the company. And so, you know, making sure you're aligned with your team on what it is you're doing and what tools you're going to use and what the plan looks like is all really, really important to being successful and working remotely. And I know I'm going really fast, but you know, I have a ton of resources, and I started to put them all here in links, and I will add more, and then I will share it with everyone so that they can have access to it. The one I want to call out specifically on this is Akimbo. I don't know anyone on the call if you're familiar with Akimbo at all, but it was basically started by Seth Godin a long time ago, and it's a technology platform that is mostly for workshops. He uses it for his Alt MBA program and a number of things like that. Today, he actually sent out an email, and they're giving free access for 30 days. And you can think of Akimbo, and the way they've structured it is essentially a virtual version of WeWork. So if you're a person who's very social and you like sort of the community and all of that, and you're not getting that from work, or you want to add on to, you know, an extension of what that is for however many weeks we have to be working from home thanks to coronavirus. This is an environment that allows for that sort of workspace and collaboration and, you know, community and notice boards and socializing and all of those sorts of things. So I would recommend checking that out as well. And then of course, you know, down at the bottom, you're going to work remote because of coronavirus, and you're going to love it so much. You're going to want to go and find all of the companies that hire remotely 100%, because there is a ton of them out there, and their cultures are really strong, and they're really oriented to, you know, just providing the best environment and, you know, giving opportunities for people to really enjoy the work they do without all of that other stuff. And then the last thing is, you know, if you're looking for something specifically for your job function, you know, it's remote working for whatever your job title is. There's a boatload of information that's available now. All of the publishers, I can tell you, you know, it's the technology company I work for now. You know, we're all over the news sites, and we're dealing with some of the coronavirus stuff too in terms of topics, but there's so much information and so much research that has been done that's now being surfaced. So econsultancy.co.uk, there's a bunch. Like I said, I'll add some more into the resources, and I'll share that after, and that's it.
Thank you, Sheri. That's awesome. For questions, I saw one question go in here. So your question is, you mentioned mute your face, but I feel like it is important to see the other human beings eye to eye. Could you clarify why it is a good idea to hide your face? And that question is from Benoit.
Sure. Yeah. So mute your face, calm your face, that sort of thing. I think it's important because when you work remotely and you're on conference calls most of the time, I think people often lose sight of the emotions that can sometimes get caught up in meetings. And so, rather than have a disagreeable face or have to complicate a conversation further, it's oftentimes better to just, close the camera, step away, or close the camera and complete the conversation. So mute your face.
All right, and then we also have a question from Karen. Is there a common challenge you find with remote work across the different teams you've worked with?
Yeah, I think it's the communication and the transparency, because I think, not with any malintent, but I do think that teams, because I'm in product marketing, so it's a highly cross-functional role, and oftentimes, everyone is so focused on going to do the doing that you lose sight of the holistic plan, or worse, there isn't one, and everyone just has their own chunk and version or interpretation of what they think it is. So it is that alignment is probably one of the biggest challenges. And that's not even necessarily limited to a remote, but I find that it's definitely more complicated, because when you throw in, part of the team is physically in an office together, and then you've got people peppered sort of remotely, conversations happen and people get forgotten. So it's the alignment that is definitely one of the biggest challenges.
And then another question from Benoit. You mentioned a weekly remote friendly ritual.
Yes.
Have you experimented with daily special ceremonies / dedicated virtual daily meeting rooms or rituals?
Well, we have specific Slack channels that we've set up, so within my particular team, it's content specifically for product marketers. So it's kind of the same thing, but it's not a very specific ritual, like at 9 o'clock every morning we do this. With the coronavirus, one of the things that we have implemented is just a daily stand-up check-in, but it's cross-functional, it's my team, it's the account team and the sales team, just to make sure that we're aligned, because we have, clients that are a little freaked out over the coronavirus, just because we're in the ad tech space, and, there's a lot of campaigns that are in flight and being heavily impacted. So, yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Karen and Noel, for reminding me that there were a couple of questions above. So I covered those. Benoit, you reposted your questions, so we're done. And I think Evelyn has a comment, which is related to Julie's comment about Mind Manager. Everybody loves the Mind Manager.
Yeah, I love the Mind Manager shout out. Yeah. Julie and I are both currently at Corel, so clapping for that.
All right. Any other questions from the group? Last call. Other than that, I want to say a huge thank you before people drop off. Thank you all for joining and taking that time to attend one more thing virtually in your day. Thank you to our presenters, Courtney, Mike, and Sheri. All of these tips are just making me realize how I can improve my current working. So this is awesome. I hope other folks in our attended the event also found some really useful tips in there. Also, thanks to the organizers. So Benoit, Andrea, Noel, thanks so much for getting this virtual session going, despite the fact that we are all adapting to a lot of change within this week. Now, I used up the Twitter jokes, but I have 2 more, and hopefully they won't fall flat. So first question, and people can try and answer this in the chat if you like. What's the hardest part about being a product manager? I'm giving everybody a chance to answer that, or at least try to.
Too many hats.
Too many hats.
Dealing with me on the marketing side. So the joke's answer is explaining to your parents what you do. So with that, a huge thank you and good night to everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Healthy.
Good night. Thank you very much, Sheri.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
I will also drop a link to our Slack channel in the chat for anyone who's still here.
And for those that are dropping off, we do have a YouTube channel and we'll post the video to that.